I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman is a novel translated from French. It's dystopian, literary fiction, science fiction, philosophy. With so many genres, however, is this novel worth its weight in croissants? Hi, I'm Amanda, and this is Spineless Books, your one-stop shop for all things audiobook. I feel a little bit like I've been stalked by I Who Have Never Known Men. I was seeing it all over the place. It kept popping up on lists and it kept popping up on recommendations, so eventually I just put it on my hold list from the library, and when it came through, I decided now's the time. Now, it's only a 6-hour audiobook, which is relatively short, so that's a pretty easy book to pick up. Nikki Massoud's narration is pretty flat, but truthfully, the more I thought about it and the more I listened, the more it made complete and total sense for the story. I have to tell you that it's really hard to talk about this book without any kind of spoilers. I went into it blind. I had no idea what it was about at all. And even though I'm going to do my best to not spoil anything for you, I will simply say this. I could tell you every little thing that happens in this story, plot point by plot point. And here's the truth. Even if you knew exactly what goes on, you'd still have to read it. I could give away literally everything that happens, but this book is an experience more than it is a story to follow. So you'd still need to read it to get the experience, and you'd still need to read it to understand exactly what I mean. So, like I said, I will try to avoid spoilers, but it's sort of impossible with this one. The story follows a nameless woman who has spent her entire life, or at least most of her life, in a bunker with 39 other women. We don't know where the bunker is. We don't know if it's on Earth. We don't know if it's above ground, if it's underground. And she has no recollection of life outside of the bunker. The other women do. And they don't remember how they got in the bunker, but they know what life was like before. But our protagonist cannot remember life before the bunker. So it is her context for literally everything. The novel really forces you to compare the protagonist to all of the other women in the bunker. Her experience is completely different. She doesn't have the references for the things they talk about. She hasn't had the experiences that they talk about. And she doesn't understand, frankly, what most of the things that they talk about are. She just knows that life inside the bunker. So it's a really interesting position to be in as a listener because you're dealing with someone who doesn't understand anything and you have more knowledge than her. She kind of becomes a blank slate and the world's most unreliable narrator. Even though she's immersed in the situation, she's effectively completely neutral, which really allowed me as a listener to reflect on what I would do in that situation, how I would behave, how I would react. So curiously, I related more to the 39 other women than I did to the narrator, which is an interesting position to be in as a reader. 3 books came to mind while I was reading this book, the first of which is The Road by Cormac McCarthy. What reminded me of The Road in this case was the fact that you're just dropped into a situation and you don't really know the history or the backstory or how you got there. It's like you hit the ground running as a reader and you're really not sure of all of the information that would be helpful and whether or not you'll get it eventually. Being dropped in a book like that definitely grabs your attention. The book also reminded me a little bit of The Guest by Emma Cline. If you're familiar with that book, you essentially follow a protagonist who really is kind of messed. And as you follow her around, you're just sort of helpless in watching her decisions. And this book had an element of that for me. Definitely a completely different story, but I felt a vibe from this book that I remember feeling really clearly when I read The Guest. The other book that I was strongly reminded of was Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. Clara, if you're not familiar with that book, is an AF or artificial friend. Now, she's really hired, essentially, or created, to be a companion to a young girl who's very lonely. And it's interesting because Clara doesn't feel emotion. As a result, she too becomes a neutral narrator, and we as the reader get a really interesting perspective of the human characters in that story through her sort of vague and neutral lens. So there was something really similar here. Even though the protagonist in I Who Have Never Known Men is a human, we get kind of a weird and just balanced but also unbalanced perspective of all the characters around her. So it was interesting that Clara and the Sun came up for me, even though, again, totally different kind of story. In this book, our narrator's truth is genuine, but because she doesn't understand the context of most of the things that are happening, she's really skewed. It forces you to interpret her reality through your own experience. Again, an interesting position to be in as a reader. She has no personal history, and it doesn't just force you to reflect, it forces you to become an active participant in understanding the story. She's both the observer and the character. Now again, I at first thought Nikki Massoud's narration was flat and uninteresting, but it was clearly really intentional, and the more I thought about it, the more it made complete sense and perfectly suited this story. Our character has no affect. She doesn't understand what's going on, and she just knows this one weird circumstance. I will tell you as a tiny spoiler that they do eventually get out of the bunker, so there's more to life than just a box in this story. I don't want you to think the entire thing takes place in a small room. There's more to it for sure. It's really interesting because it really makes you question human nature and what's necessary for survival, both physically and emotionally. I really liked this book. It was a solid 4 stars for me, and I feel like I could easily pick it up again today, start over, and learn new things from the story. I think I would interpret it a little differently with each read, which is kind of a cool feature of a book. I also think for that reason, this would be a really great one for a book club. There's lots to think about and lots to ponder and lots to question. So again, you might love what I hate and hate what I love, so make your own opinion. But thanks for listening to mine. I hope you read I Who Have Never Known Men and let me know in the comments what you think. And while you're there, be sure to like and subscribe. Have a great day.